Merci.
Jane B. Jane, it is so wonderful to be here with you again. Jane and I met recently in Paris. I brought Pitchfork Radio over for our first time in the city. There was absolutely no way that we wanted to even bother going unless you agreed to join us on air. And you so wonderfully did, and I thank you for inviting me to interview you again today. It's such a treat for me.
Thank you, Elliot.
Oh, thank you.
It's a rough thing he has to do, what's more. It's much easier answering questions than putting somebody in the light. It's a very generous and sweet thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you can curse me later. We'll see how it goes.
I'll swim.
Well, I've asked Jane if this is all right. We are going to start right at the very beginning. And we're going to come right up till now, up to this show on Thursday at Carnegie Hall. Just a quick show of hands. Who's got tickets for that as well? Give me some woos. I actually can't see you. Okay. All right. Okay, so a good portion of it. Wonderful. I have to say, Jane, you know that I told every Pitchfork Radio listener that they must run out and buy Birkin, Gainsbourg, Les Symphoniques. We're going to talk about this record towards the end of our time together, but I really wanted to start with your childhood. There are so many mysteries in your life for me. One of them being, your father was in the Navy, you were born in London, your mother actually was a singer herself.
Yes, she was an incredibly inspiring and funny person. I mean, really wonderful. She was dark-haired. She had a deep voice that had broken. So during the war, she sang a song, and she sang it very deeply, and it was called A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square. And she sang it all during the war, and people told me that they had seen her. In the song, she has to say da 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 da, and I'm perfectly willing to swear. And she cupped her ear like that, and the bombs went off, pa pa, la 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 la, and people stood up cheering. And so she's at 80 and something. She came over to America, to New York, after 9/11 to sing Nightingale again at the town hall. And I only knew about it afterwards because people said, wow, your Ma's right. We went off to nightclubs with her afterwards, and she wasn't seen for dust. She had such fun with everybody. But it was a very typical sort of thing for her to do. And I remember once when I went off to Yugoslavia during the war there, I didn't tell her exactly what I was up to, but I said to her, what did you take in London when your flat was bombed? What did you take with you? And so she thought for a very, very long time, and she said, Schiaparelli shocking pink perfume. And I said, but Ma, didn't you take baby food or, I don't know, things to eat? And she said, no, when you've got nothing left, then you have to take the superflu. And I thought that was a very, it was something I've never forgotten, and it always works. Whenever I was able to take, I don't know, fancy underclothes or scent, indeed, like her, or lipsticks, or gorgeous things, then of course the children were pleased to see books, and they were pleased to see all the things that we were supposed to have brought. But when they saw the silk underclothes, and when and I thought, she's right. So that inspiring person, Judy Campbell, was my mother, and my father, who was turned down for the services, for the army, for the Air Force, where his brothers did a sort of a very classical war. They said to my father that if he was willing to take a rather risky route from the south of England to France, to the Brittany coast, to pick up people and to drop off people. So he'd leave the English coast at sort of 1 o'clock in the morning. He'd arrive in Brittany. He'd pick up people and leave off people for the French resistance, and get back to England as fast as possible with the people. So he wasn't a typical British naval person. He was more exciting than that. I mean, he was very dashing and very beautiful, and he was sick as a dog all through. So the naval things, as he was the navigator, you know, sick all over the place. And everyone said, but David, you know, it's because it was just during the war. After that, he never went back to the Navy or anything like that. So I had two very inspiring and very odd parents. And lots of people I don't know, my brother Andrew Birkin is a screenwriter and director, and my sister's a sculptress, and it was just sort of normal to be in artistic things, I suppose, because they were already the most unclassical parents. So that's them.
Yes, yes. Your brother Andrew, of course, worked with Kubrick.
Yep.
Later on, but you guys grew up in the industry because of your mother's singing and acting. Now, I wonder, I should say the industry to some degree. You grew up in Chelsea, in London. Did you have any idea then that a career in the arts was ahead for you? Or was it something that your mother did that...
No, to the contrary. My father was a jealous man. So my mother couldn't go and be in the theatre, actually. She had quite a rough time, because if you're not in the theatre and your wife is, then in those days, he felt very left out, and so I never saw her on the stage. So I think that when I wanted to go into movies, he probably thought that was her influence, and she probably had quite a hard time about it, and Andrew too, probably. So it wasn't, it was, I was just pretty, you know, it wasn't longing to get onto the planks or sing or... No, I mean, that's all. And then by fortune, it goes on a bit longer than that. But Andrew was very bright. But no, I certainly didn't think that anything would happen for me in an artistic way. I went to boarding school where I was mocked a very great deal, if it's of any relief to any girls here. They used to say, 99, still nothing. You're a half caste, they said, and half a boy, half a girl. They picked up an acorn on the ground and said, oh, this is undeveloped, like somebody else we know. So I know very, very well what it is to be teased a very great deal in girls' boarding schools in England. So the rest of life was rather refreshing.
It all got easier. As a teenager, 16, 17, you take a role in a musical by John Barry, who's best known as the composer of James Bond movies. Tell us about that experience and about meeting John, who became your first husband.
Well, I started off in a Graham Greene play called Carving a Statue, where I went up for an audition and imagined my luck in that I forgot the words, stage struck and frightened, and I'd worked out a little part that my mother had helped me rehearse.
Oh, so your father was right.
He was, yes, but it was in secret. Yes, of course. Yes, he was right. And when it came to my turn, they said, well, that was very short. So I said, yes, can I leave now? And all the other girls had been in and they were chewing gum and wearing jeans. I hadn't. I was wearing a little dress with a flower that actually my father had given me. So one's cool. We only remember things that are rotten, whereas in fact it was rather sweet to do that. And they said, how much does she weigh? And I thought, weigh? What is this? And a boy came, a very fragile looking boy, and I said, look, you know, pick me up. And he said, oh, she's very light. And I realized that, in fact, I was going to play a deaf and dumb girl in this play called Carving a Statue with the wonderful Sir Ralph Richardson playing the sculptor, and he was going to sculpt God's legs and private parts. So it was a very scandalous play, but written by Graham Greene. And indeed, I played a mute, a deaf and dumb girl, who got, what's more, raped, I think, and then crushed by a bus. So my role was very appropriate.
Your aesthetic began early there, yeah.
I went up for an audition for Passion Flower Hotel, and they said, oh, don't learn to sing or to dance, because it'll be more fun if we can have a laugh. So I didn't, and I got the part of Mary Rose Bing Bentle. I must increase my bust was one of the rather humiliating songs. And And blow me, the composer who was very, very dashing and brilliant was John Barry. And I was amazed when he asked me to marry him, and I was, 17?
And he was 11 years older than you, was it?
13 years.
13.
Well, you count in those days.
Right. Well, at 17, so what did your family think? At 17,
They thought it was a ghastly mistake. But what can you do? One's very willful. And in those days, you couldn't just go off and live with somebody. And so he did just what he was asked. I mean, And we got married, and I had a daughter, Kate. And then he left and went to America. And that's where sometimes things play in your favor, in that I woke up to the fact that I was going to have to do something, and my living. I'd got this little creature of a year. And I went over to Paris, and I did an audition for a thing in French. I couldn't speak French.
Slogan.
And there you go.
There we go. Now, slogan is where you first met a man that we all know now, Serge Gainsbourg. You'd never heard of him before? No. And most people in England at that point hadn't. Serge had had some fame in France as writing for chanson. Let's just say, I'm just going to apologize right now for my accent. When I interviewed Jane in Paris, I speak English, I speak some relatively good Spanish, and I speak a little bit of Welsh, which is where I'm from. And so I tried to speak French, and I spoke Welsh, I spoke Spanish, so I'll just apologize to you guys now for the rest of the day. So you first meet Serge, and you didn't even get his name right. You named him after a dish.
I thought he was called Serge Bourguignon. He was very, very cross. We were not pleased at all. I don't know why I thought he was called Serge Bourguignon. It was the only thing I'd heard of.
Now, your first impression, so obviously he had a bad first impression of you, but your first impression of him was not so amazing either. You thought he was very haughty.
I thought that he didn't seem to care. And rightly so. He'd done tests all day long with beautiful people like Marisa Berenson, and I mean, who could speak French and were beautiful and talented to boot. Who turns up but me, not speaking French, having tried to learn in 3 scenes really fast with a Chinese valet who was attached to our director. I mean, luckily Pierre Gramblin changed my life, and so I tried my best. But I mean, I must have looked ridiculous. I started to cry in a dramatic scene. Serge thought that was vaguely disgusting, people that sort of mix up their private life and professional life. And so quite rightly, he thought that he didn't see what we were, he didn't see why he should say yes, but he didn't say no.
And he did have veto power at this point.
Certainly. And then I went back to London. There was the événement de mai, so it wasn't until June that I was told I had it, and I came back to France and did the movie with him when things changed. But it just goes to show, I mean, he said he was a faux méchant, and he was a faux méchant. He was a really, really kind, funny, sweet man. So, and all the arrogance and what looked like arrogance wasn't. It was just self-defense. Mm-hmm.
You told me a wonderful story in Paris about the first night that you realized this about Serge, that you'd set up a dinner to try to break the ice a little bit.
Well, Gramblin did, because Serge used to look at, we were filming by that time, and I could see that he didn't put a veto, but I could see that he was not particularly happy, and nor was I. So I said to the director, and he said, no, he's perfectly charming, really. So he fixed up the dinner at Regine's, I think. Then he went off. And I must have dragged Serge to the dance floor, where, to my joy, he walked on my feet. And I thought, oh, how wonderful, he doesn't know how to dance. How lovely. And it was absolutely charming and unexpected. It just shows, when there you go. It's very sweet when people don't know how to dance. It's like not wearing bathing costumes and being shy. It's so nice.
You have a wonderful word that you use, a wonderful milder word than slept with in all your interviews. You say, "I've only known." And at this point, you had only known one man. And yet...
How do you know?
Because I've heard you've told me. Now,
I don't always have to say everything.
now, but Jane, you decided you were going all in with Serge.
No, I didn't. I wasn't all in with Serge. It was just after the thing of the stepping on the feet business. I think we went off to Regine's and then to a place called first of all, it was Rasputin's nightclub where everyone broke glasses and they were all Russian, and it was I'd never seen anything like it. Then we went off to a place called the Calvados, where there were South American singers, and Serge played the piano with a wonderful pianist called Joe Turner, a jazz, perhaps one of the last jazz pianists in Paris. So I thought, oh, you can do that too. Then we went off to a nightclub, a travesty club called Madame Arthur, and everyone said, oh, Sergio. And I could see that they all knew him. His father had played the piano there, and all these gentlemen dressed up as ladies were there. One sat on later on, laid an egg on my father's head, dressed as a cockerel. It's just sort of things that you don't really imagine. And this was Paris. And I don't know, about sort of 2, 3 in the morning, we must have turned up in, like Covent Garden, where people are coming to sell the vegetables. And perhaps I'm making it up. Perhaps it's like My Fair Lady, I don't know. And Serge says, oh, I'll drop you back at your hotel, where Kate was, my daughter,
with the au pair.
And the au pair. And I think my brother too, who was doing Napoleon's, Kubrick was going to do Napoleon. So Andrew was there doing a reconnoiter. And he said, I'll drop you back at your hotel. And I said, no. So, no, I thought I was terribly daring. And then I thought he'd take me back to his parents, but he took me to the Hilton Hotel, where the porter said, oh, Monsieur Gainsbourg, same room as usual. So we went up in the lift, and I was making all these faces to myself because I thought that I'd been far too free and easy suddenly. And then, thank goodness, we'd drunk like fishes. So by the time I came out of the bathroom, he was asleep. I had the time to nip to the drugstore to buy a record called Yummy, 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 I've Got Love in My Tummy, stick it between his toes, and go off back to my hotel as pure as snow. So it started off that way.
I love it.
It was really...
You did not know Serge Gainsbourg that night.
No.
Now, so this is 1969. 68. By the next year, you had started recording together. And you did record one song for the movie, for Slogan. But of course, in 69, Serge approaches you with a song that he'd recorded previously, but unreleased, with Brigitte Bardot. Tell us about this.
Well, it's not particularly exciting.
It is.
No, it's not. It's not, because there were all these delicious girls like Mireille d'Arc who used to say, Sergio, what have you done with that song? And I thought, oh, crikey, if he goes into a recording studio, which I imagine would be like a telephone kiosk, too close to Serge, I thought, oh, goodness me, that's all over. So when he said to me, did I want to sing it? Of course I said yes. And of course, in 2 seconds, we were back at Marble Arch, rather, for the first time for me in Marble Arch, where he was in London, at a very great distance, one to the other. And I was singing this record that I'd heard the version with Bardot, which was really very troubling and very erotic and beautiful. And he asked me to sing an octave higher, so maybe it had qualities of a choir boy, I don't know. Anyhow, that's what we went back to Paris. And Mr. Meierstein, who was the head of Phonogram at the time, said, look, children, I'm willing to go to prison, but not for a 45. I'll go in for a long-playing record. Go back to London and record another 10, and we'll bring them out under a polythene jacket, not interdit au moins de 18 ans. Maybe it was 21 in those days, I don't know. Anyhow, that's how I started singing, out of Oh, yes, out of jealousy. And Serge had been very good. I mean, he'd recorded it with Bardot, and it's a wonderful version. It came out afterwards.
In the 80s, I think.
Yep. And so, why did I say that? Oh, yes, because she asked him not to bring it out. And so he was a gentleman, and he didn't.
And there's a reason she asked him not to. They'd been having an affair, and her husband was extremely pissed about this song.
Naturally.
Naturally. How did you feel when you first heard her version? Did you feel jealous?
Very hot under the collar, no? It was delightful.
Yeah.
No. Well, no, not at all. To the contrary. And when she wanted to bring it out years later, Serge rang me up and said, I've got bad news for you. And I said, what is it? So say it fast. And he said, Bardot wants me to let her have the version of Je t'aime mon plus with her for her animals. And I thought, well, as it should be. And I thought it would be an enormous success, actually. So I had to swallow my pride and realize that it would be better than mine. But it's the unfairness of things that went first. So it's up for judgment to see who's better. But she was very sweet when I did a film with her called Don Juan. We didn't know what to do in bed together, and Vadim wasn't much help. He just said sort of, do what you like or something. We didn't know what to do. And so I said, well, why don't we sing a song? And she said, why don't we sing Je t'aime non plus? And I thought, uh-oh. I said, oh no, we'll sing My Bonnie Lives Over the Ocean. And so we did.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, and of course, that single, Je t'aime mon plus, Jane taught me how to pronounce that, so I get that right, taught me in Paris. That became a huge hit.
Huge.
In Paris, of course, it was banned by the Pope.
Yes.
I mean, which of course only accelerates sales.
Yes, Serge said they're the best PR. True. Because suddenly it went to South America, and people had never even heard of us, of course.
That's amazing. Is it true that they were smuggling copies of the 45 under different sleeves?
Under Maria Callas covers of that. No, but it was fun because it was under dictators. I heard later, and that was a bit thrilling to know that people had heard it on the radio just before it got banned. And dictators then, of course, banned it in South America, in Spain too. Ah. But in between times, yes, they were flogging all these under the cover. No, then you feel as if it was all rather exciting. And it was exciting to watch it climb up the charts in England. It's very rare that something, well, I was going to say French, but my mother said, what a beautiful tune. And it's true, you just have to hear da, 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 da. And immediately you know where you were, you know. It's all apart from anything else, it's a beautiful tune. That you don't really have to know what the words are, and you get what it is probably helped.
You get the point.
You get the point. Yeah. And the idea of breathing and things, but no one's done anything that's been so momentous afterwards, actually, as far as a song like that is. I think in the Guardian they said it was the sexiest song in history or something. That was nice.
I would agree. An interesting fact I found out, maybe I'm sure you know about this, but because it was banned by the BBC, the original label in Britain, and I'll just nerd out for a moment, pulled it. Mm-hmm. So a second label stepped up and put it out, and this was the first fully French single to top the charts in the UK, but simultaneously there were two versions of it from two different labels in the top 20 at the same time. Yeah.
You sure?
I'm sure.
Wow.
I'm sure.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Major and minor records, it had to be, because the Queen of Holland had shares in Phonogram, so she couldn't be seen to be with such a shocking record. So they had to shift I suppose, that's what I was told anyway.
Makes sense. Well, I wanted to ask you, I interviewed your Charlotte, just a couple weeks ago for Pitchfork, and something occurred to me while Charlotte and I were speaking, which is that your mother was a muse to Noel Coward.
Yep.
You were a muse to Serge. Charlotte has become a muse to Lars von Trier. There is something in your bloodline, Jane. And I wonder, what did it feel like when Serge began writing these songs for you for this first record?
Well, I didn't know anything else. Do you know what I mean? I can't suddenly say that. I don't know. It seemed normal. I don't know why. I mean, I think the sophistication of his writing and the beauty and the rareness of him, I hadn't understood at the beginning, probably. of how clever the writing was, and we had such fun that it meant that you could do all the television programs together, and you could, I don't know, nothing went to number one particularly. He wasn't a vast success as a writer, not the way lots of people are vast successes. You know, when people talk about when he did Melody Nelson,
Right.
I don't think it went gold, and now it's considered as one of the greatest pieces of writing ever.
Yeah.
So, to know it was just fun.
Can we talk about Melody Nelson for a moment?
Yeah.
Around this time, so just previous to that, you've all settled at 5 Rue de Verneuil. Can you pronounce that for me?
Verneuil.
Verneuil. Which is just across the Seine from the museum there, from the Louvre. Very beautiful area. I actually visited it after our last talk, just to see. Covered in graffiti, memorializing Serge and Jane. For the cover, you of course were, again, the muse for Histoire de Melody Nelson. In so many ways, he wrote it for you. And you were on the cover. Is it true that you were pregnant with Charlotte?
Yeah, 4 months, I think. 4 or 5 months, because the top button of my jeans is undone.
I thought that was just,
No.
Yeah.
No.
And the monkey is there.
And the monkey's there to cover the stomach.
Hiding
That's
the baby
why.
bump?
Yes.
Did you know at the time, Jane, that this was going to be so influential? Did you know?
Well, yes. I mean, it was so amazing to listen to at the recording studios, and I get it wrong because I'm never quite sure about what instrument was actually recorded where. And I think Philippe Le Richaume, Serge's director artistique, and my fortune in being mine, I think it's possible that now you know who did the drums where and everything like that. I don't know where I was. I thought I was in London when Andrew and I listened to the end, which goes on for a very long time with the drums after Melody Nelson has had the plane crash. And it seemed so thrilling. No one had ever written a whole entire story on a 35 album, has ever done it before or since. I mean, it was so wonderful to hear. I know that Andrew ran to all those pirate radios in London. I thought it would be number one immediately. So I don't think Serge was sad. Perhaps he realized that it would take longer. I don't know. Same thing for The Man with the Cabbage Head that he did after, which was just as wonderful. They were 2 entire records of stories about The Man with the Cabbage Head or Melody Nelson, and they seemed to me to be quite extraordinary. So now they're considered as such, but at the time it didn't particularly sell. And the things that sold often with Serge were things like, I don't know, Sea, Sex and Sun and things like that, which I didn't like. I liked the B side, which was called Mr. Iceberg, I think, or Je saute de tombe en tombe. Or, Serge was a vast success. I mean, phenomenal with the Marseillaise. I mean, that was platinum.
So this is the French national anthem, and he recorded it with, he goes to Jamaica and records it with a reggae band.
He was going to write a 3rd album, another story, I think. And Philippe Le Richaume, who is this important man for Serge and luckily for me, he went off to he might stop me because he never ever says anything about anything private ever about his life with Serge, but he knows more than me. And but he did disclose this, which is probably very badly said by me, but I think that he went to a nightclub to listen to some artists who didn't turn up, and he went to the nightclub underneath, sorry, I think perhaps it was the Palace, and there he heard reggae for the first time. He whipped off the record, which was Island Records. He went off to the drugstore. He bought everything from Bob Marley, all Rita Marley, all the reggae. And next morning he was at Serge saying, "This is what you must do." And they went off to Jamaica, and Serge wrote perhaps there's 11 songs on it, but it was I don't know where, and Philippe hasn't told me, and so I'll never know, of how he thought about doing the Marseillaise. But when he did, it came out and was this vast success, as you all know. But when he started to go on tour, that's where the National Front were on the first seats of in Strasbourg, where they
This is a very right-wing organization.
Yes, they put bombs in the hotels. I mean, it was in the magazines. They had someone called Michel Droit, who said it was as straight as a Z. He was such a crooked man. He had a picture of Serge profile, drinking untypically a beer like that, and he said that Serge brought unhappiness on his co-religionnaires, which means the other people of his race. So he got into a great deal of trouble for anti-racist way of talking. And so the whole scandal of the Marseillaise, aux armes, etc., was enormous in France, absolutely enormous.
And he topped the charts with the record.
He did indeed.
It was his biggest record ever, I think, as far as sales, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. Mm. Now, you and Serge spent an amazing 13 years together. Oh, you're picking at my notes, Jane.
What's that mean, picking your nose?
Picking at my notes. Picking my nose. Yeah.
No, I can't read upside down.
You spent an amazing 13 years together, but towards the end, you knew that it was not going to work out. What had changed?
I don't know.
May I ask questions and you could say yes or no?
Oh, yes.
I asked Jane previous to this, is there anything that's out of bounds for our conversation? She said, no, ask anything, which I appreciate. I know that Serge's drinking had increased in a lot of ways during the time you were together, and I know that your feelings, you've spoken very poignantly about your own self-image in the relationship and how you didn't feel as beautiful and as special towards the end. I wonder how that came to be.
I don't know. Perhaps there's a fatal 13, you know.
Unlucky.
Possibly. And then, I don't know. I mean, I don't like disclosing things particularly, especially when you say things like, drinks too much. Yes, of course he drank too much. But
I've been there.
Why is it funny when you start off, and why is it unfunny later? Or what happens, which means that you don't believe in yourself particularly, and then somebody else sees you, and you pick up life again because of somebody else. I mean, there's a third person, and what was extraordinary was that he went on writing for me, which is why I find it so beautiful with the Philharmonic. It is that he started to write songs for me that were his feelings. So, Baby Alone in Babylon, Les Dessous Chic, Fuis le Bonheur, which is perhaps one of the most beautiful hymns that have ever been written about unhappiness and trying to escape, and Amour des Feintes, which is love of feigning and love of the dead. I mean, he wrote for me when I was 20 years old until he died. Why he went on using me, whereas there was absolutely no reason for him to do so, I don't know. That was my good fortune, is that he didn't let go of me. Artistically speaking, we had Charlotte together. And so in some extraordinary way, our life went on in a different way together. And for that, I'm terribly grateful, because it needs a second person to feel that way. And you realize when you've been in relationships where afterwards you don't even talk to each other, then you've lost all the souvenirs, all the memories, you think, well, why was I so essential? And now you don't even pick up the phone. But it happens to so many people, and it's happened to me, and it's happened to everybody. So how lucky is it when the other person managed to ride over however hard and to still maintain a friendship with you and become the godfather of Lou.
Little Lou.
I mean, he must have known how essential he was too, I presume. But that's what I find very exceptional in the fact of him going on writing for me and of using me as his feminine side, his B side, his sad side, and at the same time doing, I don't know, tough things for himself, like you're under arrest, or, you know, so still as bolshy and still as impertinent on the television, burning his 500 franc notes, saying whatever he did to Whitney Houston. I mean, the whole thing.
Do you know this story?
Is so extravagant that he needed that rebellious side, but he also needed the Russian Jewish, melancholic, feminine side. I don't know. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, that's my feelings of the good fortune I had.
Along this line, one of his lyrics that's always stayed with me is, I'm going to translate it. He says, the line is, "One thing among other things that you don't know is that you had the very best of me." And that's the song he wrote for you.
Yep.
I wonder, looking back, do you feel like you gave Serge the best of yourself?
That would be hard to, it would be a bit pretentious to say that. That I had wonderful years. I mean, really, when you look at there's a little thing of private movies in the record. I mean, he's so gorgeous. At 40, I don't know how people ever thought he was ugly. I don't know.
This baffles me. This truly baffles me.
But I think it's a thing of the times. Yeah. I think it was when he was 30, maybe with big ears and very short hair. Yeah. Perhaps he also used to have rather dramatic lighting and have a very white face. And perhaps he didn't try and be falsely pleasant. So perhaps people were frightened of him a bit. And now when you see him at 40, he's so soft and gorgeous. So yes, that was, I think, the very best. And perhaps it was the best time for me too, after all. We were both pretty.
Now, as you mentioned, Serge did write for you up until he passed away, and you experimented with a lot of styles over the years, from folk to some funk and jazz. I'd like to do a lightning round. Do you know this expression? A lightning round is, you just give me a quick answer for this one or two sentences. I'd like to get what your honest first impressions were for a couple of Serge's ideas.
Yes.
Do you follow? Okay.
Yes.
First of all, his record, his quote, shit and piss record, his scatological record, Vue de l'extérieur. What was your thought when you heard about this one?
Well, Serge could never miss a clever word or a clever phrase, even if it was a bit hurtful. He couldn't resist it. So it seemed hurtful that it should be when he was with me that he wrote, "You're beautiful, seem for the exterior, but on the inside, what a mess." Then I suppose I could have taken it badly. I didn't actually. I took something else badly, which was pick up women for what they're not and leave them for what they are.
For what they are, yeah.
That I thought was unnecessary. But there you go. If you're with a witty person, then they can be painful.
You roll with it. What was your thought about his Nazi rockabilly record, Rock Around the Bunker?
It's fabulous.
I
Have you
agree.
heard it?
Oh, I've heard everything.
I can't think why that didn't take off. Because it's so funny. Nazi rock is so wonderful. Put on your black stockings, guy. I mean, it's as wonderful as The Producers with Mel Brooks. It's that.
And from
it's fabulous.
A Russian Jew who left, his parents left
a very
about
good
prom.
position to write it from.
Right. Serge hit up a tree one day to avoid the Nazis searching his school. So he understood it very intimately. Your impressions when he first presented you with Lemon Incest to sing with Charlotte?
I thought it was wonderful, to be honest. I thought that it could be, it's the only thing I've done where I think I was wise, was that I thought that if it came out, it could be that Charlotte would be on the cover of Paris Match as being the shocking, or his shocking father's record and that was it. And I thought that it would be a shame. There's so many children that are on covers of Paris Match, you know, and yet they haven't been able to. I just thought it could be possible that in our separation, where Charlotte was a very silent child, I thought that possibly she would like to do a movie. And it seemed to me that the movie I was making with Jacques Doyon, which was called The Pirate, she would have liked to have played the little girl. And I remembered Haley Mills in Tiger Bay. And I thought, supposing it's like Haley, and it must be wonderful to be a child in a movie and express all your feelings and get it all out. Perhaps it could be rather wonderful. So I did hear about very like my own mother. I heard about an audition, and I left it on the kitchen table for Charlotte. If ever it was the film with Catherine Deneuve. If ever she thought that she'd like to go up for a test, because then she'd have something else to be considered with, and perhaps her peers perhaps she'd be good. And she was so outstandingly good that actually from that moment on, I think they wanted to give her the César when she was 8. I'm exaggerating. I don't know how old she was when she did this. But she was too young. So she had to wait until the Miller film.
The next.
And we know what an actress Charlotte is. So on that, I wasn't mistaken. And for Lemon Incest, that came out at the same time, I think that people got it in perspective. They nearly didn't. There were many things on television where people thought that it was Charlotte because she was forced to sing, that she looked uncomfortable, that it wasn't the done thing. But also with Serge's play on words and zeste de citron.
Can you tell them about the play on words, just for people who don't speak French yet?
It's a zest of lemon, like a twist of lemon.
Like the rind,
But it's also the word incest. But also it says that's the lovemaking that we'll never do together, you know. So it was actually pudique, because Serge was somebody who wanted to put people in the light when he loved them, and to show how much he loved Charlotte. Then that was his way of holding her, embracing her, was to write her something wonderful and tell her how much he loved her, like he did in the film Charlotte Forever. It was his way of expressing himself. So I think people took it perhaps a bit difficultly at the very beginning, and then quickly not so. And then Charlotte became such an extraordinary actress, and then she did Les Fontaines with Miller. But somehow, I think that it'll be very interesting to hear her sing it again.
I wonder. We'll see, yeah. Yeah. If you missed her record from earlier this year, it's absolutely amazing.
Amazing.
And parenthetically, it was the first time that we've seen a video inside 5 Rue de Verneuil. Charlotte actually shot a video in your old home, Serge's old home.
Well, it's hers.
Yeah,
Yes.
She owns it now, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Very powerful. That's the home that he bought just before you got together, and the home that he passed away in. Mm-hmm. I wonder, Jane, on a more serious note, March 2nd, 1991, where were you when you heard that Serge had passed?
I was in London.
In London. What was the feeling when you got that call?
I couldn't believe it was true. You know. And I think everyone remembers where they were that day, actually, in France. I couldn't believe it was true until I saw Philippe de Richem. Then I at the airport. Then I realized it might be so, but I saw suitcases going round, and because of course I'd taken the first flight back, and so yes, everyone. I don't think there's been anyone who's touched. I mean, there's Johnny Hallyday, pardon, but it's as if everything was just suspended. So I think that it was lucky that he knew that he was probably, with Coluche, the person that the French loved the most. It could have happened that he missed that. It could have happened that it happened after he died. But luckily, I think he saw it. I think that when they did television programs with Philippe and the children came forward singing Je suis venu te dire que je t'aimais with little cigarettes. And he was there
So
to
touching.
watch and to cry and to realize how much he was loved. Thank goodness for somebody who was so uncertain about being loved. He knew it in time. So afterwards, of course, I think that now people, when he died, Mitterrand said that he was the Baudelaire Apollinaire, that he's the greatest writer since. And I think it's never stopped growing since. And now, of course, everybody knows how the greatness of his lyrics and of the music. And perhaps he changed a whole style of writing, using English words, passing on the word onto the other line, like Cole Porter. I mean, just the most incredible writing. And they know that in France now. I mean, he is their greatest writer.
And I mean, the people who don't know his name in America certainly know his influence. He's changed Western music forever. I mean, the bands that are direct descendants from Air to Pulp and Jarvis Cocker, this is he's changed it forever. I'd like to talk for a little bit about this new record of yours, this second Birkin Gainsbourg, as it were, Les Symphoniques. First of all, I found this record to be imbued with a very deep sadness. And I don't know if I'm reading into that, but there's something that is very emotionally vulnerable about the way that you've presented these songs with an orchestral arrangement. I wonder if you could talk about the impetus behind reimagining the songs in this way.
They were sad, for the most part, very sad songs about separations, about the missing, about... I mean, thank goodness as Philippe chose the songs, there are some that are funny, there are some that are lighter. And because of the orchestrations that Nobuyuki Nakajima, who I found in Tokyo, I mean, he's done just the most incredible orchestrations on Serge's writing, some of which were classical music anyway, like Jane B or Lost Song or Lemon Incest for that matter, or even Initials BB. They were classical. So classical music, I mean, if you like Gustav Mahler or love him like me, then you have a tendency of liking that sort of indulgence in beauty and, yes, I suppose missing. Sadness, yes. Also happy things, but I think anyone who's French, anyway, remembers where they were when they heard this song or another. And you feel people are nearly pinching each other saying, oh gosh, and there's that too, and there's that too, and there's that too. And so I hope he would have been very, very happy and very, very moved. He would have been. So I don't think I can do better. And thanks to Nobuyuki Nakajima, thanks to Philippe, I think that we've managed to do something that's like movie music too, so you're never bored, because you don't know where it's going quite into the next song. It's everything I love about movie music. So, I don't know, have a good time if you're there. And yes, perhaps you'll feel a bit sad, but hopefully that's not a bad thing either, missing someone.
I think one of the things that we all love about Serge and about your songs with him, so much of that is based on his knowing the human heart and being able to put it in prose that nobody else could do. So I certainly treasure those sad songs. I wanted to ask you, since I saw you, you've been touring this around Europe, you've been to Japan again. How has this been taken? Because I've got to say, I never thought that I would get to hear Jane Birkin singing Serge Gainsbourg songs in my lifetime in New York. I'm so thrilled about this.
Oh, you are sweet.
Yep, I'm just being honest.
No.
But how is this? How has it been taken by the crowds around the world?
I'm very honoured, you know, that people would buy tickets and make that it's, I don't know, that it's a success. It's a big place, the Carnegie Hall.
It is.
Rather frightening. So, but it happened in Hong Kong. it happened in all over the world, where people have come. It's very strange. I don't know why. They don't necessarily know me particularly well. Some of them can't even speak French. In fact, I was rather pleased that somebody from the French embassy in a distant land said that they'd started learning French because of me. When you see the mistakes I make, that's quite something for the French language. But I'm very honoured should that be the case. And so it's a bit of a mystery why things catch on and why people want to be together for it. And I don't know.
Well, I just cannot wait. I cannot wait for the show on Thursday. I am very excited that you have a special guest joining you. Are we allowed to talk about this?
Of course.
Rufus Wainwright will be joining for an unnamed number of unnamed songs. But this is going to be a hell of a night. Will Charlotte be joining you at all?
Do you know, I so don't like knowing who's coming. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't see who you are. So, but it's I don't know. I should think quite a lot of singers and actors are the same. Perhaps Charlotte even is the same. That in front of your own family and at home, then it's always more nerve-wracking.
Oh, so much more.
Than when you're quite on the other side of the world, or even for me, everywhere in France. I've got no family anywhere in France. So what a fright it always is to go to London. But stimulating to see that people have come and that they understand. And for this to have happened in New York, then I don't know. I thank the kind work that had been put into this from Lily and everybody here at the French embassy, but also all the work on the promo and everything that I was able to do so people heard about it and that they could make it sell out like that. And Glusman, who's my manager, never had a manager before Arabesque. And so he found the dates and the people that would be interested. And so, I don't know, nice.
I think there's a lot of people that are interested. I'm willing to posit that. I do want to take a moment. I got to meet Philip backstage, which was a huge thrill for me. Philip was with Serge through most of his career and has produced this new record and the stage show. And I warned him that I am going to embarrass him. Philip, if you could just stand up and take a bow, if we could just applaud a man who has changed. A man who has changed music. Such an absolute honor to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
The very last song that Serge wrote was for Philippe. It was called The Man in the Shadows. And it's him. He didn't listen to many artistic directors he had. He always listened to Philippe.
Always listen.
And if anything went wrong, he said, you see, it's your fault because you weren't there. So a very, very important person in Serge's life.
Most certainly. We would love to turn it over to you guys to ask Jane questions for the next 10, 15 minutes. Maybe by a show of hands. I know there's a couple of microphones on each side. Jane, would you like to pick? Shall I pick? What's best for you? Who to call on?
I don't know.
Thank you for the house lights. Do we have anyone with a question? Over here. Perfect.
Thank you. Hi, Jane. I have a question. Have you ever written anything for Serge?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm not a great writer. I mean, with Serge as an influence in Oh Pardon Tu Dormais, we talk about him in boxes, but I don't think anyone's ever seen these movies. But they were just two things I wrote, but I didn't write them for Serge as such. I wrote them for this person, usually trilogies. And in songwriting, I wrote one record which was called Winter's Children, which was about childhood or nostalgia with childhood. And But I think that Serge managed to put the maximum of sentiment into the minimum of words. Charlotte's done the same on her record. Lou's done the same, my daughter Lou. So they've managed to be songwriters. I don't think I am.
I'm going to debate that very quickly.
No.
You did write with Serge's influence, but you did write Yesterday.
Whipple.
I mean, come on.
But even that, the Astuce was his. Yesterday.
I'm giving you the credit. Okay. There's a gentleman here, just here in a black V-neck.
We made 2 wonderful Agatha Christie films. Did you enjoy doing them?
Yes. I mean,
Did everybody hear that? He was asking about Jane's, the 2 Agatha Christie films that she acted in.
yes, I did actually. They were great fun, but much more, not really the films. It was meeting the people and the fun we had on the side. I mean, I don't know whether they were, I'd never seen them, so I wouldn't know whether they were great films. I would think that they were amusing, but it was extraordinary to have met Ustinov and David Niven and Betty Davis and Maggie Smith. Great fun. But a part that I wasn't particularly good in or not particularly proud of. No, I'm not. I've been proud of The Pirate or part of quite a few films, but I think you have to be really rather brilliant in cameo parts, and I'm not. I don't know how to do it. So it's okay as a performance, but it was much more the people around me and Ustinov.
There's a lady 3/4 of the way up in a white jacket. We should have a mic coming up to you now.
She has a microphone.
Does someone have the microphone?
Did you ever carry a cat in your inside of your Birkin bag?
A cat? A cat?
Yeah.
Did she say a cat on your head?
No, in the bag.
In the Birkin bag, yeah.
A very good idea.
Inside of your Birkin.
What?
Inside of your Birkin.
No, I got your point of putting it on the inside. I don't have a cat. I have a very, very big bulldog.
How did you start making Birkin bags?
What?
How did you start making Birkin bags?
I didn't make Birkin bags.
Why'd they even bring me here?
I didn't. I let them use my name because I drew it. But that's all the participation I had in it.
Have you left
How
air
do you
holes?
decide to draw it?
Sorry?
How do you decide to draw it?
How did I decide to draw it?
What was the inspiration?
Because I always thought handbags were too small. And I liked a little handbag at Hermes, which was the Kelly, but I could never get anything into it. So I said, why don't you make one 3 sizes bigger, but not as big as the suitcase? And then added a few ideas, but, you know, I didn't expect it to be this great success. And when they said, do you want it, can we use your
And my
name?
mom has a lot of Birkin.
The Upper East Side over here. Yeah, Upper East Side. You know, why don't we turn it over to the ushers to decide on questions, just because it's a little difficult for us to see. Did you end up with a microphone up there? Yes. All right, please.
Jane, my question is, what is your, how is your relationship with Hermes as a brand now?
It's very good. No, it is, because I took my name off when there was scandals with the crocodiles, and I hope I've made a difference. They've promised yes, so I can only hope that that's true. I mean, I believe them that it was a pretty good shock for them too, and other marks, in actual fact, were equally probably doing using crocodiles. I mean, it's all skin. I mean, Hermes makes their living out of leather. So it was for them to work it out, of the person that they were dealing with in Africa, to sort it out and to see that they weren't cruelly being killed like that. And when I found my name involved, that's what I tried to do. Because I suddenly realized it was making my name on this bag, if you see what I mean. So it was in their interest and mine to see that it stopped. And I hope it's so.
Thank you.
Hi. Is it? Oh, cool. Okay. Do you remember how you got roped into Blow Up and working with Antonioni and how they threw you in that scene with the car?
I wasn't thrown into it. I went up for an audition. I was very proud. And I got it, what's more. And I didn't expect to... I went up for an audition where I was asked to write my name on a big piece of paper behind me. So I started quite small and then turned profile every third letter. So J-A-N, profile, E-B-I, profile. And suddenly this Italian said, why are you writing your name on the wall? And so I said, I don't know, that I was asked to. And I thought, am I supposed to pretend to be a part of some league of some sort? I mean, I had no idea. So I started to cry, and Antonioni said, that's all I wanted to see. He said, now it's for you to decide. And he gave me 3 pages, I think, whatever my very small participation was, to decide whether that was something that I felt like doing or not, of being naked or not. And as I was married, I went back home and I asked John Barry what he thought about it. And he said, well, you know, as you turn the light off, when you've got nothing on, then... And I thought, I'll do it. It was one of those seconds of... He was extremely decent to me, very sweet. So was Gillian Hills, so was David Hemmings. And I don't know whether it's a particularly interesting part in the film. It's a diversion for the fact that he's blowing up his photographs and we're going to see the mystery of Vanessa Redgrave and the body by the tree.
No, it's my favorite part.
What?
It's my favorite part of the film.
Oh, you are sweet.
Yes.
But I don't think it was... I mean, it didn't require much acting ability, I don't think. But it was...
That's some great wrestling.
That was why it was there, dramatically. And after that, the shock it caused, and I don't know, that people were nicking bits of the film because we were wearing no clothes. I don't know, I sent my mother hotspot to go and see what she thought. And she did, it was like children in a swimming pool. So on that, as I was already vastly pregnant, I took her word for that's how it was. I've seen it on television at 8 o'clock in the evening, to my embarrassment. It was not something I particularly longed to see at 8 o'clock in the evening, but well, it's become a sort of quite a normal thing. Whereas when it came out, I think in Times Square, John Barry rang me to say that there were queues all around the Times Square. So it caused a sensation, but it wasn't anything that I'm glad to have met Antonioni. I loved other things in that film, notably when you walk through a park at 6 o'clock in the evening and you hear the rustles of the leaves and it's nearly in black and white and you go down the tree trunk and you wonder whether you're going to see a body. That's changed parks for me for my life. It's,
An amazing fact about that, too. You were the first fully nude, fully frontal scene in UK cinemas.
Yep.
With that, yeah.
Yep.
So you've not only revolutionized music with Je t'aime, but...
Well, in the English press it was Jane, in brackets, blow up Birkin, and then it was Jane Je t'aime, in brackets. Like it's, my poor parents.
Now it's Jane Carnegie Hall Birkin. No, it works. We have time for one more question. Does somebody have the microphone? Please, I defer to you.
You've talked about Serge Gainsbourg. I'm wondering about Doyon and your relationship with him. You've managed to have relationships with very, very creative men. What would you say about that relationship, and what was different? And
I think probably they were the most interesting films in my whole career. La Fille Prodigue, La Pirate. Comedy, I'm not quite sure, I don't know. I haven't seen it in so long. But if I was at the Cinémathèque the other day, it was probably thanks to Jacques. And it wasn't a very... No one thought I could do dramatic parts, particularly. I'd done Sept Mois sur Ordonnance. I'd done a few things that perhaps were a bit surprising for my very limited sort of scope. But La Fille Prodigue, I think it really was an extraordinarily written part, being with Piccoli. And La Pirate at Cannes, they weren't things that I ever thought that I would ever be in a film festival from where I started, you know. And so I'm immensely proud that he's such a great writer in movies, and probably one of France's finest directors. So whenever they're shown or there's an occasion to talk about it, also to talk about him as a movie maker because of Lou and her pride in him, which is just as important, even if he's not that well known outside the cinema market in the world. It's always a pleasure to talk about him and that extraordinary way he has of getting the best performances out of actresses. Even if you go to 120 takes, he'll do it. It's all that matters for him. So, a very, very fine movie maker and of devastating beauty when I met him.
On that note, I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank FIAF for hosting this. This was such a wonderful time. Jane, thank you for letting me ask you anything, as you told me. And before you go, we thought that we wanted to do just a little something to close our evening together before the book signing. Something that you will not hear at Carnegie Hall. Okay? You ready? Je t'aime. Oh oui, je t'aime.
Moi non plus.
Jane Birkin.